Content creation these days has become quite the minefield of problems to solve. You have so many different platforms, each with their own algorithm. You've got all these different formats and specs to hit in terms of how long can a video be? Does it need to be vertical? Does it need to be horizontal? Are you posting over on TikTok? That has its own set of parameters. Is it an Instagram Reel? Is it a YouTube Short? Is it a YouTube Classic? Are you posting it to Facebook, which is still existing and ticking there in the background? You've got Twitter or X. You've still got Snapchat somehow. You have TVs, smart TVs with Roku and broadcast channels built right in. And when you're making content, you've got to navigate this whole maze, this whole labyrinth of questions and considerations of how do you do what you're going to do in a way that stands out, that actually gets seen, that beats the algorithm somehow against all odds when everyone else is uploading. And if you're going to do it, where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it on TikTok? Are you going to put it on YouTube? Is it for TV? Are you making a commercial? What are you doing and how should you do it? And the question that comes down at the center of all of this is almost always, do I shoot it horizontal or do I shoot it vertical? And the answer, to just cut to the chase real quick, is both. Do both, horizontal and vertical. But that doesn't mean that you need two different cameras. You don't have to shoot it twice. It doesn't have to be more work to shoot horizontal and vertical at the same time. And the answer to that and all your problems is something called OpenGate. Now, if you don't know what that means, OpenGate in its simplest terms just means you're using the whole sensor of the camera. You see, a lot of times, almost all the time, the camera itself is cropping the footage some way, somehow, some way, usually to 16 by 9, but that could depend. But most cameras have a sensor that is larger than that is uncropped. And that's what OpenGate means, meaning you're getting the full sensor area. Now, it gets in the weeds a little bit depending on what camera you're looking at. Different sensors have different aspect ratios. So some might be 4:3, others might be 3:2, other sensors might be 1:1. But essentially, in the simplest terms, OpenGate just means you're getting the most image. You're getting the uncropped image. If you've shot raw photography, you should know that the crop is just metadata. When you shoot raw, you're getting all of the pixels from the sensor and the crop that you choose in the camera. Even if you choose to shoot 16 by 9, that's just a metadata crop that you can always undo later. When you film in OpenGate, you don't have the raw flexibility. You're not shooting raw necessarily, but you are starting with the most information from that camera's sensor. This has been a time saver, a game changer for me when it comes to content creation because I'm able to shoot vertical and horizontal at the same time. I don't need two cameras with two different lenses. I don't need to configure a rig, one camera horizontal, one camera vertical. You see all sorts of crazy rigs nowadays, people using the stereoscopic 3D, mirror box rigs to shoot horizontal and vertical at the same time. You don't need to do any of that. It can be as simple and as cheap as buying one camera as long as it has the ability to shoot OpenGate. And for me, the choice has been very clear for the longest time that is the Lumix cameras. There might be some Sony cameras that shoot OpenGate, but not any ones that I can think of, unless they're really, really expensive, in which case that's probably not why you're watching this video. Canon, I don't think has any cameras that do it. Nikon doesn't have any cameras that do it. The only place you might see and start to see more OpenGate is from companies like GoPro. I know they've been a little bit more progressive with their thinking about how they're capturing content on their newer GoPro cameras, as well as companies like DJI or Insta360, kind of in that content creator category where they're cheap cameras, or tend to be cheaper, I should say, a little bit more affordable. But really the sweet spot for me in terms of having a professional camera that's affordable, that can shoot OpenGate, has been and continues to be Lumix. It's one of the unique advantages of the Lumix ecosystem. They've had OpenGate for the longest time because essentially it's the way it got introduced because of anamorphic shooting. Now, this is kind of in the weeds a little bit, but basically anamorphic lenses stretch your image, usually widthwise. You could use it to do vertical as well, I suppose, but traditionally anamorphic stretches your footage horizontally. So you want to start with something a little bit more square, so it gets squeezed out to something more or less like 16 by 9, 2.35 to 1, 2.4 to 1, whatever the aspect ratio might be. And none of that really matters, other than the fact that Lumix put OpenGate in their cameras first by calling it anamorphic. And I think that was on the GH4. It might have been a little earlier on the GH3, but certainly on the GH4. And then with the GH5, GH6, GH7, now pretty much all the Lumix cameras have some sort of open gate mode where you can record video using the full size of the sensor, which even if you're not doing horizontal and vertical, even if you just want to like reframe your content in post-production, in editing, it's still a nice advantage because again, you're filming in an uncropped fashion. If you're cropping in camera while you're recording, you're just throwing that information away. The sensor saw it, the camera just didn't record it. The lens saw it, the camera just didn't record it. So to film OpenGate, yes, does take a little bit more data. So your files will be slightly larger. You might need a little bit bigger of a memory card. But in general, the trade-off isn't that drastic. We're talking about, a few extra rows of pixels on the top and the bottom to really fill out the frame. I've made plenty of videos on this before. There's other creators who have talked about this a lot as well, but it still is one of those, I don't know, under the radar features that not a lot of people give time and attention to, thinking, it must be harder than it is. It's more trouble than it's worth. I'll just go, put two cameras side by side and I'll rig one horizontal and one vertical. That's literally double the effort, double the file space. It's twice as much work to do it. And even then, it's still less than ideal. That's a huge pain. The best way, I think, is to have one shot, one performance, one piece of content that is captured in as universal way as possible. And for me, that's OpenGate, meaning I can put the content and send it vertical for social. You could even crop it square if you want square video. You could crop it horizontal to 16:9 for television. The same piece of content becomes much more universal, much more flexible and adaptable to any platform, any algorithm, whatever the demands might be. This space is changing so quickly. For the longest time, YouTube was the king of internet video, and everything was 16:9 because that was the HD standard. And it just was 16:9, widescreen, horizontal. It's what your TVs are. Laptops, iPhones, they're not all exactly 16:9, but they operate around that standard where it just is a universal format, 16:9. Everyone knows it. And then all of a sudden TikTok comes along with vertical video, and then Instagram introduces it, and YouTube does it with YouTube Shorts. And you've got, 4:5 video for a while on Facebook was a thing. It might still be the case, 1:1 video, square video. There's so many different styles and shapes of publishing distribution formats, but I don't ever think you should limit your content to fitting in one of those molds in particular, because it limits you from all the others. That way you don't have to decide whether you're going to put it on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or on the TV. That doesn't matter as much as what you're filming, how you're going to be creative, and shooting in a way that retains the most information possible and gives you the most versatility later, which to me is OpenGate. It simplifies things. It keeps the cost down. You don't have to spend a bunch of money doing vertical and horizontal at the same time. You don't have to pick one over the other and say, well, we're just shooting vertical, so turn the camera sideways. You can shoot one time, one piece of content, and still put it anywhere that you could ever want. OpenGate is the key to this. I've said it a million times, and I'll keep saying it a million times more, because people overthink it. They think they need to spend more money. They need to work harder to do the same thing. And ultimately, all you're doing is chasing the arbitrary demands, the arbitrary algorithms that these companies put in place of, well, we like 60-second videos. Well, now we're going to increase it to 3 minutes. Well, it's 90 seconds on this platform. The time, the duration of a piece of content is arbitrary. The aspect ratio is more or less arbitrary of just whatever the platform accepts. So you do have to cater to their rules, their restrictions, so to speak. It has to fit their format, but you don't have to restrict the way you produce the content to adhere so strictly to one platform or one style. You can take a one-size-fits-all approach with OpenGate and actually be more successful, because now your content is everywhere that people want to see it. The users on all these different platforms do and they don't. Everyone is comfortable where they're at. So a lot of people prefer TikTok for whatever reason. They prefer YouTube. They prefer Facebook. You want to reach people where they're at. You don't want to force them to have to come over to a different platform. sign up or do something different. If they're comfortable on TikTok, if they're comfortable on Instagram, that's fine. They can stay there and you can make content that hits them as well as content that reaches the people on YouTube or even the people watching on their television set, on their Roku or whatever device it might be. You're going to have a hard time moving people around. And if you're not publishing content there, you're going to miss those people altogether. So I like the idea of putting the content wherever people are watching and however they like to watch, whether it's vertical, horizontal, long form, short form. You can make your content fit into those buckets pretty easily and cheaply. You know, this is not expensive. It's not even that hard once you get the workflows dialed in. And you can do everything you're currently doing without having the headache of going, do I shoot vertical? Do I shoot horizontal? How do I make this happen? OpenGate is the answer. Once you start that process, I think you'll be quite impressed, quite shocked with how well it actually works to do all the things you want to do and more.